Hi, I'm Jock Woodruff, and this is my husband,
Jeff Woodruff.
and we arrived in Portugal over 4.5 years ago. We retired here from living in Northern California outside of Sacramento, and have been here ever since we left the United States in 2020.
And we currently live just outside of Porto, northern Portugal, in a little seaside town called Perafita, about 15 kilometers outside of the city of Porto.
And another 25 kilometers away from Braga, which is northeast of us. I have trouble with my north, south, east, and west.
And we're a few kilometers west outside of the flight line of the Porto airport.
Yep. So it makes it very easy for us to travel all over the world. It's wonderful. Residency for us was very, very easy. We established residency using the D7 system, which is based upon our passive income being sufficient so that we would not become a burden to the state of Portugal, to the country of Portugal. And we were supported in our residency process and our visa process and getting our financial number and a lot of our original work process by the assistance of João Gil Figueira's law firm in Lisbon. And so that made it even easier for us. It was the best money we ever spent. And the D7 visa residency really is a very simplified process, very easy to do. And if we could become residents, I think anybody in the United States could become a resident.
And because we went through the residency process just as the country was shutting down because of COVID, if it wasn't for João Gil Figueira's firm, they really supported us through the quarantine period.
Yeah.
Our appointments were rescheduled a couple times, and we finally arrived. We arrived mid-March of 2020, and we didn't get our appointment until the beginning of August 2020. So it's been just exactly 4.5 years since that we've been here, and 4 years since we've got our residency. And so, like Jock said, Joao's firm was an invaluable instrument in helping us get our residency and our other things that we need to establish residency.
Hmm.
So the Portuguese, being a social democracy, they love their paperwork. So like any socialist government, they really do love their paperwork. And you find that you have to keep and retain a lot of paperwork. And it is not uncommon to bring a box of paperwork to deal with the government, because chances are they will ask you for documents that you were almost sure you didn't need to bring, but you're glad you did bring them because those will be the documents that they'll ask for. Now, I've worked for the state of California in civil service for almost 10 years before retiring and coming here to Portugal. And I got to say, the Portuguese do take it to a whole new level. But Jock, you were saying something about
Jeff very definitely was accustomed to bureaucracy. But we learned a few new tricks on the bureaucracy level when we came here. But we were very fortunate to be supported by João Gil Figueira's firm. They really had a lot of the lists and answers and everything that we needed, so that we were well prepared for the bureaucracy. It's just when you start doing some things on your own, like we decided to do the driver's license exchange on our own. And it was right at the time during the pandemic when they were trying to do everything remotely and using a new computer system
trying to go online.
And we had to apply 4 different times. Jeff got through, and I finally I gave up, decided, oh, I'm 71 years old. It's time to stop driving anyways.
But it took me 11 months to get my Portuguese license after several application submissions and them getting lost and stuff. It was, so you want to definitely bring your patience to this country. I've coined a new phrase, persistent patience. You got to be courteous, but you need to be persistently patient, and always make sure you follow up when you say you're going to follow up, because otherwise things can fall through the crack and get lost in the paperwork shuffle.
But it's we're retired. It's a great way to meet other people when you go to all of these face-to-face appointments to try to get something done, and it's fun. So we don't mind. Well, we found that the cost of living in Portugal is far less than what it was in North America, in California, in the United States. Our monthly budget nowadays, 4.5 years later in this country, is about a fourth of what our monthly budget was living in the United States. And so there are some things that are more expensive. Electronics are more expensive. Automobiles are more expensive. And gasoline is more expensive. But by and far, our utilities are much less than what we're paying in the United States. The food is much less expensive than in the United States. Wine is much less expensive than in the United States. And so our lifestyle really is wonderful. We're able to do entertainment, to travel, to enjoy life in retirement, when in the United States, the only way we would be able to do that, still living in California, is to be continued working full-time jobs, both of us. And we're able to retire here and live off of our passive income of retirement, and with no difficulty with our budget. Taxes for us, we found that the real estate taxes are different from what we were accustomed to in the United States. When you purchase your property, you're going to pay a significant amount of tax. Over the life of the ownership of the property, it's far less than what we were paying in the United States. And then the interesting thing is that the annual taxes that we were accustomed to in the United States for owning real estate is significantly less here in Portugal. It's a minute number. It's so minute that our municipality only charges us that tax once every 3 years on the condominium that we own here, because it is so small. It's only about 100 euros every 3 years. So real estate taxes are different, and that's definitely something to get used to. Income taxes, it starts around 25 to 28% and then goes up based upon how much you're making. And so everybody is paying income taxes if you've got income coming in. Our passive income, fortunately, is not as heavily taxed.
We made it under the 0% NHR program back in 2020, thanks to João Gil Figueira and his firm. And really, the income here is pensions, because we're under the NHR program for 10 years. Jock's, Social Security is not taxed. My pension with the state is also not taxed, because it was earned through civil service serving the state of California. Income, though, it can be taxed a little bit higher, but it's done fairly and not unreasonably at all.
And we're in favor of paying tax, and so that's not a difficulty whatsoever.
Because unlike here in Portugal, you see your tax dollars at work. You see the people out cleaning and rebuilding and working and stuff like that. It's not like your tax dollars go to waste here. It's really great.
Now, sales tax is something that, unless you're really looking at the fine print on your receipt, you don't even know that it's being charged, because the price of anything that you're buying, whether it's on a menu or in a store, the tax is included in the published price. And so, again, the sales tax is collected on everything. And we find that it's important that that tax is paid, because it definitely takes good care of you in Portugal.
Yeah, we believe in paying our fair share in taxes here in Portugal.
Well, Portugal is indeed different than the United States. It's a dual healthcare system. There's the national public healthcare system, and then there's the private healthcare system, where you can either purchase insurance to use private practitioners in private hospitals and private clinics, or you can actually purchase it directly from that hospital clinic group. In order to get your visa and to apply for residency, you have to have private Portuguese medical insurance purchased in order to do that application. Because again, the Portuguese don't want to consider you as an immigrant if you can't take care of yourself. Once you've established your residency, as we said before, that's when you apply for the national health system, and you go to your local community council and apply.
We go to your central health center.
And then you go to the central health center with the document that you get from your community, again, bureaucracy, that says that you indeed live at the address that you live, and then you apply to get into the national health system. Then you're given a number via the national health system, and then on your renewal of your residency card, your national health number is put onto the residency card after your 2-year renewal.
So, as Jock said, there are some hoops you got to jump through, and you really do want to make sure you get they call it you do want to get your paperwork squared away with your council hall, called a freguesia, before you go to your Centro de Saúde, your health center, your local health center, to get and apply for your health number. But once you're in, it's really easy to get in. For example, yes, we have both used both the private and the public health system. For example, a couple of years back in 2022, I went to my private health care for a routine exam. During the exam, they said, "Oh, we found something, but we can't remove it here. We need to get you to the public hospital." And good news, like Jock was saying, the doctor who did the routine exam at the private hospital said, "I also work at the public hospital, and I can help get you in, and we can take care of you at the public hospital." And that's exactly what they did 2 to 3 months later for me. And it went really well, really seamless. The services here are fantastic. The healthcare here, even with the private health insurance, is much more affordable than what you're going to find in the States. It's absolutely amazing. Portugal ranks number 12 as far as quality healthcare around the world. For example, the United States ranks about 69. So it's a big difference.
Yep. It's amazing, the healthcare service the service that Jeff got through the national health system, and it cost us nothing, absolutely nothing. When it comes to safety, one of the reasons why we moved to Portugal is definitely because it's such a safe country. Every time, when we visited and did our exploration, we felt indeed much safer here than we did anywhere else in the United States. Portugal is ranked number 7 in the world for safety, and the United States is ranked 131. So indeed, it's much safer to be living here. Now, I have to admit, just because it's safe, don't be overconfident. I seem to be a magnet for what is the only kind of crime that we've ever discovered in Portugal, and that is pickpocketing. In the big cities, in all of the very touristy areas, there are incidences of pickpocketing. And I had a near miss at the Lisbon airport where I realized somebody had their hand in my jacket pocket when I was trying to get a coffee at a coffee counter, and then just earlier this spring, I didn't even realize it, but I was in the marketplace at the Bilal Market, a very touristy spot in Porto, and about an hour later, I realized I didn't have my wallet anymore, and so I lived and I learned. Got to keep your wallet a little bit more in a place where you can feel it if somebody's trying to reach in and get it out of your pocket.
Yeah, keep your valuables safe and secure on your person. Don't wear a lot of flashy jewelry or anything like that, because pickpockets, and especially like Jock said, in the big cities, it is a problem.
In the touristy areas, just be aware. But that's the only crime that we've really experienced. We don't see all of the news of all of these horrific crimes that we were watching all the time when we were living back in the United States. It's a much more peaceful, quiet, sleepy little country.
Yeah, and Portugal rates number 7 on the World Peace Index, 7th in the world, whereas the United States, for example, ranks around 131, 132. So it's not, it's a big difference once again.
Yeah.
So the weather here in Portugal reminds us a lot of back home in California.
Yeah. If you know the weather in California, you know the weather in Portugal.
It's a very, very Mediterranean climate here. The southern part of the country, just like Southern California, very dry, arid. Warmer winters, warmer summers, probably can get pretty downright hot down there during this time of year. But the winters are a little bit more temperate, not as cold as up here in northern Portugal. You're going to find a lot more rain. We had an unusually wet winter this past winter that thankfully alleviated much of the drought in this country. And then
filled up the reservoirs.
And we had an unusually cool winter too, especially in the interior, where usually only 1 or 2 areas get snow, and a few areas got snow this last winter. But just like California, it's a little bit warmer along the coastal regions. And then as you go into the interior, you can expect more weather changes. Like, for example, today it's been in the beautiful 70s here on the coast.
This is an August summer day.
And as opposed to Braga, which is 30 kilometers from the coast, it's in the high 80s, low 90s Fahrenheit today up there. So it just depends on what your preference is. We like the coastal breezes here. You're not always going to get that as you go into the interior. Humidity can be an issue. Thunderstorms happen here a lot. But it's nothing that's completely unbearable. It doesn't last very long.
No, when we don't have anything like the humidity that you have in the southeast of the United States or anything like that. We have more of the California kind of humidity. So in the wintertime when it's damp and it's wet out, of course it's going to feel more humid, but all summer long, a humid day for us is 40% to 50% to 60%. It's not that beastly humidity of 95, 90, 98% at all.
I think because one of the interesting things is things are a lot smaller here. The homes, the cars, a lot smaller here because the roads, most of them are smaller, and most people live in flats or apartments or condos. You don't have the big swaths of model homes that you would find in the United States, though that they do have that on a small scale here, and they do have homes and farms and stuff like that. But that's more in the suburban farm and rural areas. So for here, one of the things that we notice is that people don't tend to entertain as much at home. But usually they get together. It's very much European cafe culture here, where people will get to meet at a cafe to get together, and they'll play games, or they'll drink and talk a little bit. They'll play dominoes, play cards, whatever.
Linger over dessert.
Right. It's mainly a cafe culture, and they normally work about 5.5, 6 days a week here. And Sundays is like the one day that they normally get off. And that's the big family day. That's when they go to the patriarch or the matriarch's house, and they'll have a big family meal there if they can accommodate that. Otherwise, they'll go to a park or a public space, and they'll have a meal together there. So it's very different.
But it's exclusively family. It's not a gathering of friends and family.
No, that's more in the public spaces, because they probably just don't have the space for it. Now, as you go out into the more rural areas or more suburban areas, they'll still probably get together at your local town plaza or park. But they might have more room to entertain more people. But in the cities and the more urban areas, no, it doesn't work that way. The cafe culture pretty much is how they do it here. And then, I think that's it for the cultural part. Yeah. Anything you want to add, dear?
Well, also the thing that I've noticed is that the Portuguese people not only are so family oriented, but they are very friendly. But at the beginning, almost always, the Portuguese are very, very shy. So it takes a little bit of advance reaching out. But as soon as somebody feels comfortable with you, you start learning their life story. And nothing is more important than the time that you're having in conversation with somebody else. And that's so different from anything that we ever experienced in the hustle bustle of living in the United States and growing up in the United States. This really reminds me of what it was like when I was a young kid in the 50s in a small little town of 5,000 people in rural northern Minnesota. It's much more, everybody knows everything about everybody else in the neighborhood, and everybody is looking after everybody else in the neighborhood. It's that kind of, and also the Portuguese people are so welcoming to anybody from elsewhere. This has been going on since the age of exploration. The Portuguese have been going out and bringing people home to their country for centuries. And so the Portuguese are the ones who are taking the culture all over the world. I don't know why, but it dawned on me on that airplane traveling from San Francisco to Lisbon that, oh my God, I don't know anybody in Portugal, and I'm moving there, and they're all saying that the country is locking down, and we've left all of our friends and family back in the United States. What was I thinking? But lo and behold, when we were in our first apartment, within the first few days of that apartment, I was standing outside the front door, taking in the fresh air, pretending that I was being locked in, and looked off to my left, and about 5 doors up was another couple in the apartment 5 doors up doing the same thing I was doing. They waved at me and I waved at them. They walked a little bit closer to where I was. I walked a little bit closer to where they were. And immediately we started talking, and within an hour, we knew so much about each other. And we had made our very first friends, Portuguese friends in Portugal, who've remained one of our best friends in Portugal. They now live down in Lisbon, and we really do count them as our very best friends. So and from that moment on, I realized it was not difficult. And we've made rich, wonderful friendships here just by being open to talking to people and listening to their stories. It's been very easy, hasn't it, honey?
It has. It really helps, though, if you make an effort to learn the language. They really appreciate it when you try to speak to them in Portuguese rather than Spanish. They'd actually rather you speak in English if that's the case. And so if you can, make an effort to learn the language. It is difficult, but it's not impossible to learn.
Yeah. Most of our friendships have been built around somebody helping us with our Portuguese.
And they bend over backwards to help you learn.
Oh, yes.
Well, learning the language, as I said, has been a challenge. It's a very difficult language. You're learning sounds that have never been used in English.
You have diphthongs and triphthongs.
Yeah.
They trip me up.
Yeah, even the pronunciation of things, which is what trips me up. So I can read it and write it much better than I can speak it. One thing I know you asked about, well, what's different? One of the things that I found shockingly similar, but it is also different. The Portuguese are wonderful people in person, but you get them behind the wheel and it's just like dealing with fellow Sacramentans. They are the worst drivers. It is not uncommon for them to stop, double park in front of a cafe, turn on their flashers, and go inside, get their coffee and pastry, come out 5 minutes later and go into the car and then drive out.
They'll nod and wave at you and say thank you.
Sorry,
but carry on.
Yeah, they'll block traffic for it. So you really, if you're going to live in the cities, I really recommend foregoing a car. The infrastructure here is so much so that the public transportation, the metro, the buses, the trains, it's not an issue. Now, I did get a car earlier this year from my other part-time job, and I like it. I like driving outside of the cities. Inside the cities, we try to take the metro or public transportation. But driving out, it's not so bad. But the Portuguese don't follow the rules of the road here. They don't use turn signals. They do sudden stops. So I've learned, just like I did back in the States, to drive very defensively and very carefully.
And I have to admit, the infrastructure is so much different here in this small country, the size of Indiana, with the train system, the bus system, the metro systems in the municipalities. It is so easy to get all around this country. We spent a good almost 4 years without an automobile and had no difficulty. I think we only rented a car twice the whole time in those 4 years. Mm-hmm. That was the big change and really changed my mindset on I don't need a car. And it's nice to live that way.
Agreed.
Well, Portugal, especially in the major metropolitan areas, is no different than North America. We've got the great big shopping malls. We've got the great big box stores. We've got the great big supermarkets, the mega markets that sell clothing, sell automobile parts, sell pet paraphernalia, sell everything, including furniture. But then also Portugal, in the major metropolitan areas and all the way into the rural areas, has this culture of what we refer to as the loja culture. Loja is the name of a store, and it's really a small little store that's usually on the ground level of somebody's home or in an apartment building. And those lojas are specific to what the people sell. There's the pastelaria for pastries. There's the padaria for bread. There's the fruteria for fruit. There's the peixaria for the fishmonger. There's the talho for the butcher. There's the zapateria for the shoes. I mean,
these mom and pop stores.
These mom and pop
are
stores
make a large of the retail here in Portugal.
And all of them have some of the modern conveniences. You can use your multi-banco and charge things. Some of them are very specific that they would prefer to only take cash. But it's wonderful. And people will go shopping every day for at their favorite places. We even know somebody who goes to one butcher for their chicken and another butcher for their pork. I mean, everybody's got their preferences, and it's just wonderful.
And you also have the option to go to the mercados and the open air markets, which usually happen once a week. The larger cities have a mercado,
Yep,
like
municipal mercados.
and those are open usually 6 days a week. There's one in Matosinhos near us, and there's one in Porto. So it just
And there's
depends
one
on
in
your
Bragos.
preference. So
Yep.
yeah. So yes, we have tried quite a bit of the local cuisine. Here in Porto, the big thing is a francesinha, which is a big sandwich made of meat and cheeses with a big sauce made with piri piri seasonings and beer and cheese.
And an egg on top.
And then they put cheese on top of that, put more gravy, and then they put a fried egg on top. Jock and I joke that that's like a meal in and of itself for 3 or 4 people.
3 meals in one.
I can only eat about half of one of those, and I usually prefer the vegetarian variety. The regular kinds are a little bit too heavy for me. And then since we live near the coast, I really have learned to enjoy the seafood. I was not a big fish person before moving here. Now it's like I'm learning to enjoy the fish more. So I love the robalo, the grilled sea bass here. I've discovered presebes here, which are the gooseneck barnacles. Those are really delicious. And then, of course, their tiger shrimp here are like the size of small lobsters. They're really impressive. The shellfish, mussels, all that clams are incredible. And of course, I've gotten to enjoy octopus. They make a really delicious octopus.
Yep, Jeff loves
salad
his
here.
povo now.
And then as you go into the interior, you have you've got your duck. I love the arroz con the duck rice.
All the grilled meats.
All the grilled meats, your goat, your beef, and pork. Pork is very big here. A lot of dishes are made with pork. One of my favorite dishes is pork alentejo, which is stewed pork with clams and vegetables and a nice savory sauce. It's absolutely delicious. But and then of course the signature dish of this country is bacalhau, which I think I'm mispronouncing it, but is codfish. And like Jock was telling me earlier, there's 400 recipes for that. That is the signature dish here.
You could have a different bacalhau every day of the year and not try every recipe. And they come from all of the little towns and regions and families, and everybody's got a different one.
Yeah, there's regional differences all throughout Portugal. So it's pretty impressive. So yeah, those are some of the things that we tried. I'm not a huge cod person. I prefer it grilled. I'm not into it with the cream sauces and stuff like that. So.
I'm a fan because I grew up with codfish cakes as a kid, but it's wonderful. The food and the cuisine in Portugal is absolutely wonderful.
And what's nice is they don't allow GMOs and preservatives here, so the food is a lot fresher. It doesn't stay. It's not going to keep, so you need to eat it fairly quickly. And they don't use as many chemicals, and they don't use antibiotics or anything like. So it really is farm to table here. It's really fresh, delicious, tasty food.
Healthy, healthy, healthy.
Absolutely. So one of the things that really surprised me about this little country, as we said about this, which is about the size of Indiana, or roughly the size of Indiana, is the fact that it has had such a huge influence on the world. The history and the culture here is amazing. It predates prehistory, going back to the Neolithic, Paleolithic, Bronze Age, Stone Age, Iron Age, medieval time period. It's really fascinating, and the influence that this little country has had on the world, especially during the age of exploration, being one of the first countries with sailors to circumnavigate the world. And John,
the discovery going around the world. I didn't know until I lived in Portugal that the ukulele is not from the Hawaiian Islands. The ukulele is not South Pacific. It's not a native instrument to the islanders. It came from Portugal. The ukulele is an instrument that was first made and used in Braga, just 45 minutes away from where we live. And it was taken by the sailors to the South Pacific and became the staple of the islands. But the ukulele was used by the Portuguese for much longer before that. And also tempura, that's not native to Japan. Tempura is actually a dish that was taken to Japan in the 16th century. I didn't know that. It was the dish in Portugal that we've had many times is peixinhos de horta. And that's actually green beans that are dipped in a batter and deep fried in oil. And the Portuguese missionaries took it to Nagasaki in the 16th century, and voila, now we have tempura from Japan. But it actually is from Portugal.
Mhm.
So we're kind of fascinated by this influence that Portugal has had all over the world, and the rich old history that dates back before Roman times, even, of this country that has been the specific country that it is for well over 600 years. The same border. We're fascinated by that, and it's just wonderful to discover it and to keep discovering these little discoveries every time we visit another spot in Portugal.
Portugal is a pretty cool country.